Artificial intelligence is profoundly changing the way nations fight and how they defend themselves. From AI-driven drones to autonomous submarines, meet the European innovators rewriting the rules on defence, challenging the old guard and driving a new era of tech sovereignty. With war on Europe's doorstep, we speak to the startups bolstering Ukraine's resistance against Russia.
There is no substitute for a real battlefield. You can build things in the laboratory, you can test them, but you don't know whether they really work until you've seen it on the battlefield. And Ukraine, sadly, is where that is currently happening.
And at the end of a year in which stock prices of Europe's biggest defence contractors have soared, where's the real value now? And is there a risk of a bubble? Welcome to Bloomberg Tech Europe. I'm Lizzie Burden in for Tom Mackenzie. Well, a quiet revolution is quietly reshaping Europe's defence industry. Artificial intelligence, once experimental, is now driving the systems, redefining modern warfare.
When Russia invaded Ukraine, Europe's defence vulnerabilities were exposed. Now, a new generation of defence startups are fusing AI with sensors, drones and battlefield software. They're being fuelled by soaring defence spending, which Bloomberg Intelligence says needs to jump to $720 billion. It's been described as a fundamental change to the architecture of defence, moving from hardware-heavy arsenals to software and AI-driven autonomy. Germany's Helsing epitomises the shift. Europe's most valuable defence startup, valued at €12 billion, is building autonomous autopilot software for jets and underwater surveillance drones. Other key names in the European defence tech space include Tekeva over in Portugal, Quantum Systems in Germany, and Stark, which is a UK-German company. Three trends stand out: smarter decision-making through AI, autonomous systems that work with or without humans, and supply chains built for strategic independence. For investors and industry, defence is no longer the preserve of old contractors. Agile startups, dual-use technology, and rapidly increasing government funding are redrawing the map. In Europe's push for security, AI is the new front line, and the business of defence may never look the same again.
Bloomberg's Tom Mackenzie. Well, let's take a closer look at Helsing, Europe's most valuable defence startup, valued at €12 billion. At the Bloomberg Tech Summit in London, co-founder and co-CEO Torsten Reil talked about the new defence systems they're building to defend Europe, but also struck a cautious note, telling our own Tom Mackenzie there is a bubble in defence tech and some investors are bound to get burned.
When we did our first funding round, I remember in 2021, when defense wasn't that popular, to be honest, amongst investors, and no European VC wanted to touch us, we had a slide in our pitch deck that said that we thought there was going to be a galvanizing event, and that was going to be an invasion of Ukraine by Russia, which I guess we got right, but what we got wrong was the timing, because we thought it was going to happen in 2025. And how close are we right now to another conflict, maybe at the NATO eastern flank? The date that we're hearing everywhere is that we all have to be ready and operational by 2029 at the latest. So when we think about systems that we're developing, either in prototype form or going into mass production, we always have that day 2029 in mind.
Okay, 2029. NATO countries have now committed to 5% of spending, 5% of GDP. How is that? That's going to take some time to trickle through, but it's starting. How is that changing defence innovation, both here in the UK and on the continent?
So first of all, it's good to see those increases, and they're now real increases. It's particularly visible right now in Germany, but also a number of the Scandinavian countries. The reason it matters is not just because of the pure increase in money. I think that matters as well. There is a very specific reason it matters for innovation and for what we call defense technology, and the new technology that's now required in defense, which is based on autonomous systems and on AI and software. And the reason is that existing defense budgets tend to be entirely locked up already in legacy programs. So even if, as a country, you wanted to reallocate that money, you actually find it politically really difficult, because it usually means cancelling projects and programs that a lot of jobs relying on. So it doesn't tend to happen.
It feels like there are hundreds of drone companies being started up here in Europe? I mean, obviously, almost on a daily basis, and I think according to some reports, there are over 100 different drone startups. So as we think about the capital that's going into defence tech, is that rational? Are we seeing a bubble in when it comes to drone startups here? How are we thinking about whether or not that fund flow specifically into drone makers is rational?
I think there's definitely a bubble right now, and the reason for it is what I said earlier. In 2021, not a single European VC in particular wanted to touch defense. Now everyone has moved into defense, and including the crypto caravan that's moved from crypto now into defense and is trying to spend its money there. I think in some ways it doesn't matter. It creates noise in the market, obviously, but there is a lot of money, I think, that's not going to see a return.
So there's going to be consolidation when it comes to the drone startups. Is that what you foresee, and you're going to be active in that space?
So there'll be some consolidation. I think there'll be a lot of drone startups, and in fact defense startups that are going to disappear again over time. We have a Cambrian explosion at the moment, which is fine. I think it's to be expected. But probably 80% of those companies aren't going to make it.
What is your vision of what air warfare looks like in 5-10 years' time?
I think it's pretty clear that it's going to be largely uncrewed. And the reason is that the AI just makes faster decisions. It's able to find new strategies in ways that humans can't. And I think in a number of years' time, it will be ethically problematic to send humans into the sky against these.
And you touch on ethics there, because we're talking about unmanned systems piloted by AI agents. How deeply do you think about ethics, about the challenges of human in the loop, about who gets hold of your software systems and your hardware?
Yeah, we think that as a company that's steeped in democratic societies, we have a specific responsibility to think about the ethical side. You mentioned human in the loop. Our view is that the human should always be in the loop for systems. And once you have autonomous mass where you have so many systems that you can't monitor each one of them individually, you should at least have a human on the loop. And then you have to make sure that that human is actually an effective human in the loop or on the loop. So they need to be able to not be overwhelmed by the data, not be bored. And there are all kinds of KPIs that we need to track in terms of whether a human actually does their job that are currently being established. So this is one thing. The other thing that I think we have a special responsibility for is to think about who we make those technologies available to.
And before we wrap up, you spend a lot of time here in the UK, and you cooperate with the Department of Defence. The UK obviously has a very close security relationship with the US. When we think about sovereignty, is that potentially a vulnerability for the UK?
I think we still need a close relationship with the US. I think that's pretty clear. What we can do and what we should do across all of Europe, by the way, not just the UK, is to build our own systems and be able to stand on our 2 feet, so that we reduce some of the dependency, obviously, but that also we can meaningfully contribute to the security of Europe. And it's pretty clear that we haven't been able to do so over the past few years. It's changing now very rapidly. And my prediction, by the way, is that in the next few years, Europe is actually going to lead even over the US in terms of the deployment of real AI-enabled autonomous systems.
Europe is going to lead the US in the deployment.
I think so.
Of AI
I think
systems.
it's going to look that way in terms of the visibility we have right now in terms of deployment that's planned in terms of the volume of these autonomous systems, particularly for the NATO eastern flank. I think Europe is going to lead.
Helsing Co-Chief Executive Torsten Reil speaking there to Tom Mackenzie. Meanwhile, one of Helsing's biggest rivals, German defence giant Rheinmetall, told Bloomberg that the company needs to deliver 40,000 military vehicles in Europe alone as the continent faces an increasingly aggressive Russia. Here's what the CEO Armin Papiger told us about the year ahead.
If you see what happens at the moment on our ammunition side, we are on a very good way with new production lines. The second thing what we do now in the next year is we do the automation of the vehicle systems, because we have to deliver only on the European side and mostly for Germany 40,000 vehicles. And so we have to automize our production lines. Number 3 is that we start now next year the production of satellites. So the first 40 satellites will be under contract, I think, end of the year. And but Germany needs not much more. We speak about 200, 300 satellites that we are able then to produce here in Germany.
Rheinmetall CEO Armin Papiger. Well, coming up, Palantir's AI-fueled surge. We'll speak with the company's UK chief on why Britain has become a key hub for its defence work and how artificial intelligence is transforming global security. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back to Bloomberg Tech Europe. Now, Palantir has emerged as one of the biggest winners of the artificial intelligence boom. The company develops powerful data and AI platforms that help governments and businesses make faster, smarter decisions. And investors have taken notice. Palantir's stock has surged some 135% this year, far outpacing the so-called Magnificent Seven tech giants. In the third quarter, US commercial sales jumped 122% from a year ago to almost $400 million. Internationally, government revenue climbed 2/3 year on year, fueled by Palantir's expanding work with the UK government. Tom Mackenzie sat down with Mosley, Palantir's UK head, to discuss the challenges and opportunities shaping the future of defence technology and how artificial intelligence is redefining power in an increasingly unstable world.
I think we're living through two big global changes. One is geopolitical and the other is technology. The interesting thing is they're happening at once. So you've got the world moving to a much more, well, let's call it the moment of American unipolarity is over. There are now adversaries, particularly China, that are near peer or even potentially stronger than the US in certain ways. So that's a fundamental geopolitical shift. But at the same time, you're seeing a revolution in artificial intelligence, technology which will change every aspect of our lives, not least defense and military. And I think that will play out over a very short period of time. This could happen in 5 to 10 years. And it's of the scale of the Industrial Revolution, but will play out over a much shorter period of time.
How does the AI component play into Palantir? It's central clearly to what you do. How does generative AI and large language models, how are you building them into your products, particularly when it comes to automated defense software and solutions?
So we provide the software layer in which you deploy the models. So the LLMs are held, if you like, in harnesses by our software so that they can be used in secure, auditable and transparent ways. And that means you can get the maximum value from them. The best way of thinking about an LLM is like a unit of cognition. So all of the workflows, all of the daily tasks that involve some element of human cognition, those are what you might be able to replace over time with LLMs. Now, of course, you need to do that in a way that's very secure, that's very transparent, that's very auditable, but that's what we're embarking upon now. So our software is being deployed by a number of allies in the West, broadly defined, to do precisely this. And what you're seeing is an exponential improvement in their productivity and in the efficiency of what they've traditionally done.
So that's here and now. What does that look like then in 5 years' time, given how rapidly AI is innovating? And if scaling continues as we expect, what does defense software look like in 5 years? How agentic will it be? And how do you keep human in the loop?
So I think the question of how you keep humans in the loop is going to be a policy question. Technologically, unfortunately, I think we're moving in a direction where much of the process can be automated. So lots of this could be done by agents. And so the big question that we're all going to have to confront is, where do you insist on having a human in the loop? And I think in the West, we're very clear about the importance of maintaining that. My concern is that adversaries may not be.
What specifically does Palantir put in place to ensure that there aren't disastrous errors in the deployment of this software? What mitigating factors are built in?
Well, you could think of our software as the mitigating factor. So we are the harness in which you run the model so that you can do that transparently, securely, and auditably. And the audit is the key thing. It means you can know and you can go back in time to check when a decision was taken, what did the decision maker know at that moment in time? What was the context in which they made the decision and so forth? And in the end, that's the safeguard. There's a human in the loop taking the decision, but the software captures everything that the human knew at the time. And so, for example, if it's a question of collateral damage, was that something that was available as information to the decision maker at the moment when they took that step?
You've worked very closely, of course, Palantir, in Ukraine for a number of years since that conflict. What has Palantir learned, what has your team learned by operating, working with the Ukrainians, particularly when it comes to the pace of digital transformation on the battlefield?
Ukraine has been the R&D lab for AI in a military context for the last 3 years. It is the absolute bleeding edge of military technology. There is no substitute for a real battlefield. You can build things in the laboratory, you can test them, but you don't know whether they really work until you've seen it on the battlefield. And Ukraine, sadly, is where that is currently happening. I would pay enormous credit to the Ukrainians here. They have been phenomenally innovative. They're ingenious in many ways. Part of that is circumstance, that they have not had all of the equipment and resources that they would have liked, and so they've been forced to innovate. But that has led to an extraordinary acceleration in military technology, where you're seeing major leaps every 6 to 8 weeks, where tactics and procedures have to change because of some fundamental technological discovery or progress. And I think the only historic analogy that I'm aware of is the development of radar during the Second World War, where every bombing raid back and forth across the Channel led to some fundamental discovery in radar. You're seeing something similar occur today in artificial intelligence in Ukraine.
You've signed pretty significant contracts with the MOD here in the UK. You're investing here in the UK. How does that position Palantir to grow and lock in future contracts of that size and scale, not just in the UK, but on the continent?
The UK is, we believe, the country outside of the US and China that has the best quality and quantity of the kind of engineering talent that you need to build software like ours. So the UK can be an epicenter of defense military technology development. It has all of those ingredients. So that's why we're very keen to make a significant investment here. We want to tap that talent in effect. We already have 1,000 people in London, and that is our second largest office globally, but we want to grow that significantly over the next 5 years. And the UK is the premier military power in Europe. It's a key pillar of NATO. I think it has the potential to be a key bridge into the rest of the continent, but also act as that security guarantor for many other countries.
Palantir's UK head Louis Mosley. Well, Russia's invasion of Ukraine has pushed the country to become a drone superpower. Skyton is a Ukrainian unmanned aircraft firm with nearly 2 decades of experience developing and supplying drones for commercial, industrial and military use. Pavlo Shevchuk, Skyton's international CEO, spoke to us about Europe and the US moving away from China.
The whole world is very much dependent on Chinese supply chain and Chinese components, electronic components. And that's changing both in Europe and in America. It takes time, obviously. We need to take this time now while scaling up production of electronic components in Europe, that all the defense producers review their bill of materials and really make it China-free.
Pavlo Shevchuk, international CEO at Skyton. Well, coming up, how long will it take for Europe to build a drone wall? Jeannette Fürstenberg, managing director at Global's VC firm General Catalyst, has the answer. That's next. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back to Bloomberg Tech Europe. Now, European defence stocks have soared this year, with established firms like Rheinmetall and Saab booming as nations pour money into rearmament. Our next guest believes that investors must continue to bet on Europe, but that more money needs to flow to younger, agile defence companies. Jeannette Fürstenberg is the managing director of global VC firm General Catalyst, which has backed defence tech startups like Helsing. It's the kind of company she says is key to establishing a truly sovereign European defence industry.
If you look at the past cycles, the F-35 is an example that is often quoted because we basically are buying something that we fundamentally don't control. There's a so-called kill switch in there that if, whoever kind of sits at the other side of it doesn't believe this thing should fly, then it won't fly. And so if we take that same analogy into modern defense systems, then we want to make sure we are in control of our own destiny. And that is why we do need to build for sovereign, AI and defense technology. We have amazing entrepreneurial talent in Europe that is capable of building sovereign technology. And I think our allies will respect us for that, and they will be leaning on us even more when we're able to build a credible deterrent stack. I think where sovereigns and sort of state procurement really needs to make a rapid shift in mindset is really when it comes to procurement. So the existing procurement is too slow and is not really directed enough towards sort of modern defense technologies. It's very much oriented vis-a-vis the sort of old legacy incumbent. So if you think about the numbers that recently leaked in Politico on where some of the German spend is going, then we have basically mandated 26 billion that are going into frigates. And then the question is, what do frigates really do when you think about the protection of the NATO eastern flank, right? It doesn't do very much. So the question becomes like, how do we think about building a drone wall? That is something that Helsing has been propagating since the early days.
Given what we're seeing, given what you've seen, given what Helsing has been building out, the fact that Europe does not have a drone wall on some levels seems remarkable. There was still 12 months maybe away from that happening.
I don't think it has to be 12 months. I think if you speak to Helsing, I think they could deliver that much faster. That's the one answer I will give you. The second thing I often think about, Tom, is if you went 20 years forward in time and then looked back on this current day and age, are we really translating urgency that we kind of see and feel from an external perspective into the realization to really act on it as fast as we need to? I think people are very much holding on to this sort of 2029, we need to be ready by 2029, and kind of keep that as sort of some number, where I was like, well, how do we know that this is really the case? Why don't we believe that if we are saying 2029, others will say, well, then I come in 2028, right? I think the question becomes like translating that urgency that I think everybody is now sensing and feeling, that gets sort of expressed in more and more sort of dangerous ways.
That was Jeannette Fürstenberg, Managing Director of global VC firm General Catalyst. Well, next month on Bloomberg Tech Europe, Tom Mackenzie travels to the Netherlands to speak to the Chief Executive of ASML, the Dutch chip equipment maker, of course, which is now Europe's most valuable public company. That exclusive interview with Christophe Fouquet, which airs on December 12th, will look at how ASML has positioned itself at the heart of the global AI supply chain and what comes next. That does it for Bloomberg Tech Europe. The opening trade is coming up next. This is Bloomberg.